Like Atlanta, the Philadelphia Fusion potentially look primed to be real challengers in the Overwatch League 2020 season, and they'll be the focus of my team preview today. Despite reaching the grand final in 2018, they were unable to find similar success last season due to a continuing issue of inconsistency. So have things actually changed after this off-season? Whilst on paper Philly's grand final appearance in the inaugural season would suggest that 2018 was a strong year for them, it is often overlooked and forgotten they were incredibly inconsistent throughout the regular season, with the team only just sneaking into the playoffs at the end of that year with a 6th and final spot. They did produce some excellent results in that time frame, such as handing the New York Excelsior their first loss, but due to the streaky nature of this team, there were also times where they struggled. For instance, when they almost lost to the 0-40 Shanghai Dragons, having to salvage that Stage 3 series by a score of 3-2. Given their vastly improved playoff run that saw them reach the grand finals, including impressive wins over two informed teams in Boston and New York, many including myself expected them to produce more consistently in 2019 and build upon what had looked to be a solid foundation from the year before. Instead, it was more of a case of deja vu, with the Fusion again being held back by inconsistent performances, eventually saw them just make the play-ins, but they were subsequently defeated by the Dragons, eliminating the Season 1 finalists before the playoffs even truly started. In truth though, upon reflection, Philly last season weren't actually inconsistent. Instead, they were consistently mediocre, with their 2018 stars underwhelming and disappointing, whilst familiar issues at main tank remained. So let's see what the team have done with their roster this off-season to try and fix these issues for the 2020 Overwatch League season. At DPS, Carpe and EQO have returned for a third season, whilst Kib and their two-way player Snillo have been released. Adding depth to this position group, the Fusion have signed Ivy from the Toronto Defiant, Hisu from Korean contender side Runaway, and also, to the shock of everyone, the streamer Chipsa. Tank meanwhile sees Sada remain in the lineup alongside Poco, with the team making one of the most high-profile pickups of the off-season, with the acquisition of Fury from the London Spitfire. Lastly at support, Boombox is the only survivor of the 2019 roster, with Neptuno being released to join the Guangzhou Charge, whilst their other two-way player Elk has also been let go, and has now joined Harrisburg University in the collegiate scene. In their place, the team has made two big pickups, firstly the signing of Funny Astro from Atlanta Academy, but also by promoting Alarm from their academy side Fusion University, as he's finally come of age. Rather than a complete rebuild, Philadelphia seem to have taken the pieces of their 2019 roster they liked, and have tried to bring in big name talent to upgrade and improve their lineup ahead of next year. Along with these player changes, the organisation have also made a major move in regards to the coaching staff, with KDG replacing Hwai and Hayes at head coach. This decision has been received with mixed opinion, with some thinking KDG will really help the Fusion improve, whilst others have a little more apprehension. I can understand why this is the case after his time on the Seoul Dynasty, considering the positives and negatives the team had. Personally, I thought his management of the 12-man roster was good, and really gave the Dynasty good flexibility and options in terms of their style, which could translate well to Philly's large roster. That said, at times this 12-man roster setup did potentially complicate team selection, and actually stop some of the better performing players from developing with consistent playtime, not to mention some of the strange decisions and strategies they employed. So it will be interesting to see if similar problems emerge on Philadelphia to determine whether more blame lied with KDG for these issues in the past, or instead with the Seoul players. Returning to the players though, let's first take a more detailed look at their DPS position group, where the return of Carpe and EQO comes as no huge surprise. Both have shown in the past that when they're at their best on form, they can be one of the most deadly DPS pairings in the league that can absolutely dominate. And following the introduction of 222 Rollock, perhaps they'll have a greater chance to showcase this in 2020, with the issues of the GOATS meta firmly locked in the past. This isn't a guarantee, however. Sure, in 2018 both of these players were fantastic, and probably one of the more consistently positive aspects of the Fusion roster, but 2019 was an entirely different story. Even if we put the first three stages to one side, where this pair looked demotivated in the GOATS meta, Stage 4 following the introduction of 222 didn't see them bounce back and perform to the level many of us expected they would, and this is certainly a concern heading into 2020. Whilst Carpe may have been an MVP candidate in 2018, and EQO being one of the inaugural season's breakout stars, their underwhelming past season should serve as a warning that their quality and potential isn't a guaranteed product. On paper, they should have the potential to shine once again as two of the best DPS talents in the league, and they'll need to be playing at that sort of level if Philly want to be serious challengers, given they are likely to be the two DPS starters. But we have seen recently that this level of play shouldn't be assumed, and it is a legitimate question mark that they and the team will need to answer early into next season. As for their new DPS pickups though, starting with Ivy, I found it interesting how negatively many have viewed his signing, with most holding the view that he's a subpar player and won't add much to this team. Considering that I believe that for most of this season, the team will be starting Carpe and EQO, I think that Ivy can make a good specialist or rotation player that can be developed to play certain strategies throughout the season, given the glimpses of potential he showed on Toronto last year. He's someone who I think we need to see more of to be certain of his overall quality, but given his likely bench role, I think he's not the worst pickup in the world, especially if he can recover a similar level of play he showcased back when he was in Korean contenders. Hesu meanwhile is a player I'm excited to see play on this side in the future. I haven't seen too much of his play, but from what I have seen and heard from others, he looks to have a lot of promise. And with him not turning 18 till March, he still has time to improve and work on his skills, which, should Carpe and EQ underperform, may be required later in the season. The last EPS player to discuss is Chipser, who I and many others have given our opinions on in the past. Do I think this was a great move for the team? No, and I'll explain that a little more in a bit, but that opinion doesn't have anything to do with the quality of Chipser himself, rather the team's decision. With him being on the team though, I think Chipser can have a positive impact if called upon. Carpe and EQ both looked lost in the Doomfist meta at the end of last season, and both of their new signings don't appear to be proficient on the hero either. So given his expertise, Chipser fills what potentially could have been a major meta weakness for his side, and even if he doesn't play Doomfist, I'm sure he can help make his teammates play the hero better if he's asked to, meaning that he certainly has a role to play, but it isn't all related to the business side of things of the organisation, although that certainly is the main part of it. And ultimately, whilst I can see why people are being vocal on his overall quality, we at least need to give him a chance. Moving on to the tanks now. This is where I think the team has made a big mistake in signing Chipser, as they've fully committed to Sado at main tank with no backups or alternatives behind him. In general, the community seems to be split on how good Sado actually is, with a large portion believing him to be really bad and basically a feeder in comparison to the other players at his position, whilst others are more apologetic and suggest that he's not that bad at all, and it was more stylistic problems that caused him to look so bad last year. For me, the bottom line is, from what we've all seen, he hasn't looked good or played well. I don't think anyone can really argue against that. However, he has shown, particularly on Winston, glimpses of his potential quality, and considering that the team seems to have a complete faith in him by keeping him in the side with no one competing for his spot, they must see that he's doing well in scrims and practice. Am I willing to give Sado another chance? Yes. Would I have liked to see them bring in an alternative though? Absolutely. And that is because if Sado doesn't improve in 2020, then you can say goodbye to any chances this team can potentially challenge for the title. And by not giving themselves a backup plan, the Fusion are in my eyes rolling the dice with him, so we'll have to wait and see if it pays off. At off-tank though, it's an entirely different story, as in my opinion Philly have the strongest off-tank pair in the league with Fury and Poco. If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you know how highly I rate Fury. Even in spite of London's troubles, I thought he was outstanding last season, and was still on par with a player like Choi Hyobin. If he's able to deliver a similar level of quality for Philadelphia, then this team will have one of the best in the business playing for them at the off-tank position, who could even help to raise the overall level of Sado on the tank line, which should help propel this team. Similar to how he had to help an underwhelming gesture for the Spitfire last year. But just because they now have one of the best off-tanks in the league joining the squad, don't ignore the impact the Poco may be able to have over the course of the season as well. Whilst I wouldn't expect to see him ahead of Fury if the meta requires Diva or Roadhog, there is a chance KDG, who as we know likes to fully utilise his rosters, might ask him to specialise on heroes like Zarya or Sigma, which could give the team flexibility and options depending upon the meta, whilst also taking some of the weight off of Fury's shoulders, which you could tell towards the latter end of 2019 was starting to take its impact on him and Profit as they desperately tried to carry London. So this off-tank pairing I think is one of the biggest bright spots in the Fusion heading into next season, and is something to really look forward to. Lastly, we have to look at the supports, and this is a position that on paper looks primed and ready to dominate for Philadelphia in 2020. Funny Astro is such a good signing, and in my opinion is a big upgrade at main support compared to Neptuno. He was excellent on Atlanta Academy in 2019, and has the potential to be one of the top Lucio players in the league should Lucio remain the go-to main support. Perhaps you can ask whether he would have the same impact if he's required to play Mercy or another support hero, but I have confidence he'll be able to rise to his challenge and deliver a similar level of quality, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do next season. Of course, the biggest signing of his position is Alarm, who we've been waiting to finally come of age and be able to show off his quality at the Overwatch League level. I shouldn't need to tell you that he's mechanically nuts and has the potential to pop off and dominate from minute one, which could put him in the conversation as one of the best players in the league alongside the likes of Jonak if he lives up to the hype. That is if he plays to his potential and promise of course, which I think he will, and a potential duo of him and Funny Astro could honestly become the best performing support pairing in the league, but of course we have to see that come to fruition first, before we get too ahead of ourselves. Boombox's return meanwhile I think should be a welcome one. Compared to his 2018 displays, it would be fair to say that he underachieved in 2019, with a number of inconsistent performances. That said, we have seen that when he plays at his best, he can have a major impact, so as a backup, I think he should be a good option should he be called upon. Bringing this all together though, I think it's pretty clear that if you take the most likely starting six for Philadelphia, you have on paper potentially one of the strongest teams in the league if everyone is firing on all cylinders, but legitimately could be a major competitor to win the Overwatch League altogether. I mean, considering that Sado is the only recognisable major weakness for this side, highlights the quality that the team has assembled around him, particularly at support and off-tank. I do see potential hurdles down the line though if Sado does disappoint, or if other players underperform, and that's why I can't confidently put them right at the top alongside teams like San Francisco or New York. But for once, I think that the Fusion could actually be a much more reliably consistent team of quality that I think should find itself inside the top 5 or 6, with a solid playoff berth. So if this team does fail to reach the playoffs, then I think the 2020 season won't have just been a disappointment for them, but a major failure. For now though, that's all I've got to say on the Philadelphia Fusion ahead of the 2020 Overwatch League season, and if you have reached the end of the video, then I'd like to thank you for watching. I'm going to keep these videos coming over the next few days, so if you have enjoyed and don't want to miss out, then please like, subscribe and follow me on Twitter or at my Discord so you don't miss out. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.